To już będzie finałowe wystąpienie, tak więc dajmy jeszcze moment dyskutantom na ochłonięcie. Emocje opadną, one towarzyszyły nam do samego końca, co było związane także z głosowaniem. Dziękuję bardzo za aktywność. Dziękuję Państwu za aktywność także w tej sferze przy głosowaniu, a teraz przejdziemy do wystąpienia. Gość opowie o tym, jak niezapewnienie ochrony nowemu pokoleniu jest właściwie brakiem odpowiedzialności z naszej strony. To profesor Manfred Spitzer. Połączenie online. And now let me switch into English, the risk and the side effects of digital technology. It will be the lecture that concerns that failure in protection the new generation from side effects of digital technology is a lack of our responsibility. We have a dear guest from Germany, as I said, Professor Manfred Spitzer, psychiatrist and neurobiologist, head of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Ulm. Professor Spitzer, do you hear me? Are you with us?
Yes, I hear you nicely, and everything seems to be fine. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for this information. I hope that good quality of our connection will be at the end of your speech. Apologize that we don't provide you the translation into Polish, but I hope that all translation, all the lecture of our guest will be translated during recording that will be published in the near future on our website, NNO21. So, Professor Spitzer, let's start.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to, I think, is a wonderful event that you think we should take responsibility of our next generation. And I'm all for that. I've written books about this. And let me state very briefly, I'm not concerned about us adults. I'm concerned about children, young children, older children, adolescents, and well, in part, very young adults, as long as they are not too responsible for themselves, even though legally they are. But brain development stops at about 25. So this is about the time that I worry about, 0 to 25. And I will give you an overview about the risks and side effects of digital information technology as regards to physical health, mental health, education, and society. I cover a lot of ground, will be very brief, but as you just said, I'm glad that this is going to be translated, and so that you will have it in a form such that you can review it. You can look up the references for yourself. If you need more references, they are in my books. You can even write to me and I'll give you the references. So it's not me who is saying what I'm going to say. It's the medical literature, and the literature that's published in, well, the world's best, highest quality journalism and medical science, so to speak. And I'm insisting on this. This is not my personal view. This is the view that you get when, as a scientist, you look at the evidence. So body health, there's bad body posture. Need not go about this. Everybody knows this. There's the smartphone thump and the smartphone neck and many other things. There's being overweight because of a lack of physical exercise, because of the use of digital information technology. You hang out in front of a screen, you don't move much. That's a big problem. Because of this, there's diabetes, hypertension, and other things. And let me go into something that's not very well known, but it's a big issue. It's short-sightedness. That's also called myopia. And this is really a big issue. Why is it? Well, the smartphone is the most used gadget by about half of the world's population. It's at the same time, it's the one that's used most of the time by most people, between 5 and 7 hours every day. You carry it in your pocket, you give it to your 8-year-old child in many countries. And it's the most problematic digital gadgets for these reasons. And in addition, for a very simple reason, this is the smallest digital device that we have. That implies you look at it at close range, about 25 centimeters. And that has a huge effect on eye development. This is a normal eye. This is a short-sighted eye. It is a bit too long, and so you need a lens to correct that. This is a child's eye, which, because it's too small, it's not in focus. So it has to grow to be and get into focus. And a very interesting thing happens. You have in your retina, at the back of your eye, you have a built-in mechanism that lets the eye grow until the image on average is in focus. So it's a really wonderful mechanism. Your eye grows until it's in focus. That should take care of all eyes that ever grow so they are in focus. By the way, it has been discovered in chicks' eyes, and it has by now been found in cats and dogs and primates' eyes, and we have that mechanism as well. It was discovered about in the 1980s of the last century. Now the thing is this happens under normal development. When you look at close range, the rays meet further back again. So just looking at close range gives you an elongated eye, therefore short-sightedness. That's known for 140 years. A German professor of ophthalmology discovered it in Greifswald at the Baltic Sea. And 10 years later, an American published it, and it's known. It's called school myopia. And it's because of reading books. You need glasses in the end. And in the movies, it's always the not so brown because he's never going outside boy who wears glasses, who is the bright guy, but not always the nice guy. And well, you know what I'm talking about. It's the picture book image that we have on somebody who is good in school and he wears glasses. So. And the reason for this is if you look at close range, well, you train your eye to be too long and therefore you are short-sighted, okay? So in the end, you are out of focus and you need a glass. So how big is this effect? Well, there used to be talk about school myopia and there's no longer talk about school myopia. And the reason is that the average German adolescent reads about 15 minutes a day as regards books. 15 minutes a day, that doesn't do any harm to your eyes, okay? But the average smartphone use, as I already indicated, is, well, 5 to 7 hours. And well, once you're adult, that's okay. But when your eyes are under development and you look at close range, that's a big problem. As you can see here, the global myopia, it's, by the way, in eye doctor circle, it's now called the Myopia Pandemic. I'm not kidding. Go to PubMed, Google it for yourself, and you'll find Myopia Pandemic. So it's really bad, and this is how bad it is. By now, we have 1.4 billion people with myopia, 163 million with severe myopia, and in 2050, it's going to be half of the world's population of about 9 billion people, and it will be almost 1 billion with a severe myopia. Why? This is from a Chinese study in 2020. So this is another measure in retired people. That is, the usual frequency of myopia is 1 to 5%. In people under 20 years in Europe, it's now 30 to 50%. In China, 80%, and South Korea, over 90%. So this is how bad it is. And myopia is the risk factor. In fact, if you look at high myopia, it's a big risk factor for becoming blind at about 50 or 60. So it's not very old age, it's still working life, and you get blind for the four major reasons to get blind, because myopia is a risk factor for all four of them. That's retina ablation, macular degeneration, glaucoma, or cataract. This is a big issue. This has been studied over and over again, which is why it's really a problem. Okay, this all came out in very recently. I wrote about this 6 years ago, and it turns out that I was a bit prophetic back then because there was not that much evidence. By now we have all the evidence we want in order to figure out that this is really a big problem. The problem costs us 244 billion plus 6 billion for macular degeneration due to myopia. That's $250 billion a year. This again, in 2021, the speed of growth during the Corona lockdown has increased 2.5-fold. And this is a Chinese study finding about the same. What to do about it? Well, the most important thing to realize is you interfere with normal eye development. Eye development happens between 0 and about 25, just like brain development, okay? There's no way to look at your smartphone in the right way. The dosage makes the poison. So hours is too much. So we have to be responsible and protect our children and adolescents. They are going to be hurt. Adults, no action needed, because whenever your eyes are developed, that's that. You can no longer interfere with development, which is why, well, you can still wreak havoc to your eyes, but not at the scale by growing a long eye, which is going to make you blind at the end of your life. Or, well, not at the end, but for the third of your life. The Chinese government, where the data have been brought about best, by the way, make it clear what they did in order to be responsible. They banned smartphones a few days after the Chinese study came out showing how bad the effect is. The Chinese studies was done in Wuhan, where the world's first lockdown took place. And the Chinese doctor has found out that in 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, eye growth speed was 3 times as big in 2020 because of the lockdown compared to 2015 to 2019. But because of this, hey, we are growing the eyes of our children into myopia very fast because we are locking down everything so they look even more at their smartphones, as has been done globally on a global scale, as you all know. So this is really bad. So they forbade smartphones in schools, which was a big thing in China because they did everything in school with a smartphone. Homework, they had their books on the smartphone, and they said, well, there's no way we are going to have, well, let's say 10% of 1.4 billion. That's 140 million blind people in a few decades. This is what the government faced, which is why they said, no way to have this. We forbid the smartphones. By now, in September 2021, they also took care of all the gamers and said, if you're under 18, you must no longer play longer than 3 hours per week. So in China, if you're under 18, you can play games on your laptop or smartphone, but only on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays for 8 to 9 p.m. And that's it, 3 hours a week. In Germany, this figure is about 30 to 50 hours a week, and we act irresponsibly. The Chinese, at least when it comes to their next generation, they act responsibly when it comes to the risks and side effects of the smartphone. Overweight, well, it's a big issue. And there are, studies on this. And here you see that during the lockdown, again, where digital screen media use increased by about 30 to 50%, you saw that during the lockdown, there was an increase in body weight and a decrease in cardiorespiratory fitness. This was a study from Austria, showed this in, 750 kids. Sleep disorders. Well, you have this you can block the blue light that blocks your melatonin. That's the sleep hormone. So the blue light is really bad and keeps you from sleeping for 2 or 3 hours per night. But even if you block the blue light, you can still notice when you get at your Facebook account in the evening that your relationship status has changed, or that the monsters that you killed get after you. So you will have disturbed sleep even without blue light. That's my point, which is why digital media after dinner are not a good idea for children and adolescents. And this has been shown over and over again in the sleep lab, in large scale studies. These are 2 examples. So what to do? Well, any age, it's not just development, any age, but again, it's worst for kids because their brains are under development. And if they don't develop very well, you risk getting a less well education, and you risk, well, because education gives you more productivity, more money, more health, and therefore a longer and happier life. And that's what you risk when you overdo it with digital information technology. Mental health, there's all of this due to more and increased digital media use. You have to realize that. Let's talk about this. Facebook knows how bad it is for younger people. This came out in the last couple of weeks. It's called the Facebook Files. They knew how bad Facebook use is, especially for younger girls. That is, for girls, that a British study showed that if girls are in Facebook more than 3 hours a day at the age of 13, their risk of having a depression at 18 is twice as high. And depression is one of the most frequent disorders in adolescent and young adult women, which is why this is a big issue. If something big gets 100% bigger, this is really something. So we have to deal with this. Addiction. This is the first study ever that came out with an image of human addiction. It was with PET, and it was, well, way back in the late last century. And what you see here is the ventral striatum that lights up if you inject cocaine into cocaine addicts on cold turkey. So this is a cocaine addict in the scanner getting cocaine, and this thing lights up. But this is not our cocaine addiction center. No way. This center, there's a gazillion papers on it. And the bottom line of this is our center for learning, for novelty, for information processing, for interesting things. It makes us happy if it goes on, but it lets us learn fast. And if you are curious about something, it already lights up. And so if you are curious, because it lit up, it made you learn faster, which is why that's also been found. The more curious you are, the faster you learn new information. This is basically the turbocharged learning effect that happens when this goes on. So this is the learning turbocharger, if anything, in normal brains. It can be hijacked by psychoactive agencies, and that can make you addictive, but it's not our addiction center. It's just that our lower limb is not the broken leg center. It can be broken, yes, and then you got a broken leg, but that's not what it is for. It is for walking. And as a side effect, it can be, well, broken, but it's not for that, okay? Same thing with this. So fast forward to 2014, the first study on Facebook addiction. So this is, you ask people about their behaviors with the Facebook, and there is a Facebook addiction scale, and you see the addiction on the y-axis, and then you see the activity in the ventral striatum, the very same area that lit the brain on cocaine. Okay, and you see that the signal changed, and it was observed in an fMRI scanner where they showed the F of Facebook. So this is a Facebook addict looking at the F at Facebook. And what do you see? You see the very same structure lighting up. The more addicted he or she is, the more this structure lights up. That gives you also cocaine addiction. So to the left is Facebook, to the right there's cocaine. This is a very short story that can be made much longer, but I gave you the 1 minute summary of it, showing that yes, there are such things as behavioral addictions. So it's the slot machine addiction, it's a gambling addiction, and there is also smartphone addiction, internet addiction, gaming addiction, and Facebook addiction. And some of this is already recognized by the medical community. And some is now, there's much research going on about it. And the reason why you hate to invent new illnesses is you don't want to burden the mental health care system with ever more illnesses. But of course, if you want to act responsibly, when there are new addictions, you want to name them, so you want to get funding for treatment. It's happened with the gambling. It happened with computer, internet, and games. It's going to happen with Facebook, going to happen with other apps, and it's going to happen with smartphones. Education. There's impaired cognitive development, more distraction, less attention, less learning, less knowledge, and yes, more digital dementia. I run you through. This is one of the many studies done in about 2,500 mothers and children. They came in and were asked, how much media use does your kid have? The kids were between 3 and 5. And then there was an assessment of cognitive ability at the ages of 2, 3, and 5. And this is what came out. So the screen use at 24 months predicted IQ, that is mental development, at 36 months. And screen use at 36 months predicted development at 60 months. And that's basically saying the more the screen use is at a younger age, the less your IQ is at higher age. It's not the other way around. It's not that the less bright people watch more screens. No, it's more screen watching makes you less bright. And this is one of the finest studies that showed this very clearly. Again, 2,500 kids. This is a study in 4,500 kids, 8 to 11 years old, that showed the very same thing. The more screen media use, the less development, the less developed mental capabilities are. And this is again in 4,500 kids, 8 to 11 years old. In Germany, there's a large-scale study in 13 years old, showed the same thing. And there are studies in 15-year-old showing the same thing. So it's just that we have studies in all ages, large-scale studies showing that digital media use impairs cognitive development, makes you dumb. I don't want to be mistaken here. It's a big effect, and it should scare parents. And so an iPad or a smartphone is not a good pacifier for babies. Yes, they become quiet, just as I did 100 years ago when you gave them a cotton cloth soaked in alcohol or even opioids. They did this 100 years ago. Now you say, they did what? They gave their baby alcohol and opioids to make it quiet? Well, nowadays we do the same thing. We give them screens, and they impair brain development and they cause addiction, just as alcohol and opioids do, which is why I'm so outspoken. And the studies shows it from the neuroscience perspective, from a developmental psychology perspective, and these are high-powered journals. This came out in The Lancet, the world's most prestigious medical journal that there is. So the data are clear. There's more distraction, decreased attention. That's the Chinese studies in more than 7,000 adolescents showing that the more they spend on their time on a screen, the more likely they suffer from attention deficit disorder. There's decreased learning, data from the PISA studies, okay? They looked at cohorts of 15-year-olds in more than 50 OECD and non-OECD countries, and they looked at how did the educational level change over 10 years and how much was spent by governments within these 10 years on digital information technology in schools. And of course, the idea was we digitize schools, get better education. So this is what should have come out. If you look at how did kids in various countries change, that's on the y-axis, depending upon whether they have spent money on fewer computers and internet access points, wireless LAN, etc., in schools, or more money on computers, of course, per capita school kid. So, well, this is the biggest data set I know of. This is a couple of million 15-year-olds. This is what you expect. If computers were good for education, this is what came out. In fact, these are the data for math and the data for language and STEM, that is mathematics, engineering, natural sciences, and technology. Came out about the same. There was never, ever a positive correlation. The correlation was smaller but negative, or 0.5, as you can see here, and negative. And this is the strongest case. This is mathematics, where you never learn mathematics outside of the school. This is what you learn in school. And so schooling has really been hurt by the digitization of schools. Decreased knowledge. Students are better off without the laptop in the classroom. That came out in the Scientific American, one of the high prestige science journals for the well-educated layperson, and that's 5 years ago. So, and there are many papers on this. So I'm not talking about, you know what, the kind of a side position, and mainstream is the opposite. No, mainstream is this. And why haven't you heard much about this? And why are you bombarded with articles saying digital is the future, we have to go digital, digital is great, and digital is better for everybody? Because there's the big lobby that tells you this. It's all about money and making even more money by wreaking havoc to the health, mental and physical, and the education of our next generation. So more dementia. Well, this came out from the Foresight Mental Capital and Well-Being Project. So there is cognitive ability. Brains are not computers. They don't download information. They are used, thereby getting better. Okay, and this is what you see. This is the trajectory of brain growth and brain development from birth onward. And then there is a decline at older age. Everybody knows this. And decline, demens, down with your mind. Dementia, literally translated from Latin, means down with your mind. The interesting thing, for every descent, there's a very simple truism. The higher you start from and then go down, the longer it takes you to get down. If you start here, you're right there. If you start here, it takes you much longer to get down. And this, according to what we know, is the biggest factor, the biggest risk factor for dementia. So let me explain, what is it that goes down? It's not IQ, it's mental functioning, mental capacity, mental ability. That's how psychologists and psychiatrists call it. But economists sometimes speak of mental wealth or mental capital. It's all the same thing. We just have a lot of names. Here it's mental well-being, okay? Here it's mental wealth. And so you see, it goes up and goes down again. I won't go into the details. I just want to show you this trajectory of mental capacity. You find it all over the place. And teaching is good. Parenting is good. And trauma, antisocial behavior, and smoking by yourself or by your parents is not good. Okay. And when it goes down, your cognitive reserve, that is, your capabilities go down. And if your cognitive reserve goes down, you will become demented in the end, okay? And there's a threshold. When you go down, 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 once you reach the threshold, that's called then dementia. Same thing here, but I added a few things here, and that is the effect of digital media. And you can see it's all bad. It goes down. Music, sports, theater, that's prevention. Use your hands, doing motor things, speaking two languages, having a successful family, purposeful work. And if you're elderly, if you have grandchildren, dancing, singing, etc., that's good for dementia protection. But what is the most single biggest prognostic factor when it comes to you and you getting demented at old age? It's the amount of education, or it's the educational level you reached in the first 25 years of life. The higher you got in education, the longer it takes you until you get dementia, no matter what kind of dementia. There's Alzheimer's, multi-infarction, there's other forms, there are dozens of forms. No matter which form, the higher you start your decline, the longer it takes you to get down. And in fact, it's not eating blueberries or broccoli, it's not dancing, it is how high you got in your youthful years until about 25, that if you got higher, you get dementia with a lower risk. And it's the single most important risk and protective factor. Not having a developed education is risk, and having developed a good education going to school, being good at school, and being well educated across the board, not specialized, across the board, that gives you more golden years at the end of your life. What do you do in school? You do dementia prevention at old age. These risks and side effects in society, and I have to be very brief, so I will. There is actually decreased empathy, trust, and solidarity, because trust, empathy, and solidarity grows by human interactions, by small interaction. Can you tell me the way to this place? Or thanks for the coffee, or small interactions between strangers. They provide the social glue, and interactions, real interaction, provide you with instances to learn empathy. If you talk to people and they laugh or they feel really sad and then they tell you how they feel, eventually you no longer need to talk. You see how they feel because you have made a lot of experiences of that type. Okay, which is why the more screen use you have, if you don't talk to people, the less empathy you have. That has been shown in the biggest large-scale studies on human development that there is on the globe, the New Zealand study and the London study, 2 cohorts, 25 years apart, completely different parts of the world, but the same thing came out. The more screen use, the less empathic you are for your parents and your peers. Decreased level of general education, I talked about this. Decreased time spent in nature. Did you know that kids today spend about 10% of the time they used to spend in nature? 10%. It's down by 90%. Because we know spending time in nature gives you more exercise, gives you nice experiences, gives you much to learn. It even makes you a nicer person because it's good for your morality. That's also been found out in recent years. So it's really good to be out in nature. And given the fact that people no longer go out, young people, when they, like me, when I was young, I was out in the afternoon. And now people stay inside, which is not good for their mental health, for their physical health, and even for their education. There is increased loneliness and anonymity because of digital media use. And then there is decreased truth. You have fake news all over the place, filter bubbles, etc. You have increased radicalization. Let me go into this for a minute. Did you know that YouTube has replaced TV as the world's largest provider of moving images? Did you know that the world's population spends about 1 billion hours per day watching YouTube videos? 1 billion hours a day, YouTube. And did you know that about 70 to 80% of what YouTubers watch is recommended by the YouTube recommendation algorithm? So it's not chosen by the people, but chosen by YouTube. YouTube, owned by Google, wants to make money via advertisement. So they want to glue you to the screen. And they found out about 10 years ago how to do this. They show you as the next movie, again, 70 to 80% are recommended by YouTube, whatever you see, on average, on a global scale. And they show you as the next movie, one that is slightly more radical than the one before. So you look at vegetarian food. And if you watch a few movies, you end up with vegan food. You look at, you want to watch jogging and inform yourself about jogging. A few videos after you are at ultramarathon. And if you Google Bill Clinton, you end up at Karl Marx. And if you Google George W. Bush, you end up at the Ku Klux Klan in a couple of videos. What does that imply? Well, it's the business model of YouTube to have you watch as long as possible. In order to do so, they feed you more radical movies compared to how radical you already are. By definition, these videos are, and this is again, 70% of what the world's population watches. These videos are by definition more radical than the viewer is, or let's say has started out with. This is called the Great Radicalization. And the story broke about 2.5 years ago in Time magazine. And it's just amazing that people don't realize how bad YouTube is, even given that we have Corona now and YouTube views increased by 30 to 50%. So given that the world by now watches roughly 1 billion hours of YouTube footage that is by definition more radical than the people are. This is a global radicalization mechanism. And again, it's the business model of YouTube. We have decreased privacy. You've heard about that. In fact, 200 million European people have their personalities found out and recorded by Facebook, and Facebook can then send them personality directed advertisements, which that has been found out in the scientific literature, give you about 40% more clicks and 50% more purchases. And here we speak about billions of advertisement money that used to go into publishing houses locally. Now it goes to California, that is to Google and Facebook, and they have a large share, about 80% of the global advertisement market. Endangered democracy. This is really scary because there's already been a publication in Nature that came out in 2012. Well, they did an investigation, and the title is actually 61 million people experiment on how to influence elections. And the question was, can we influence elections? And they used the Congress election in 2010 and asked the question, can we, by using the digital information technology, can we influence the result of elections? The answer was, yes, we can. Again, published in Nature. So it's no wonder that some people came up with a business model for Cambridge Analytica. That is, we sell winning elections. And they did so not only in terms of Trump or in terms of the Brexit. We also owe them 200, and they bribed themselves with that. They prided themselves with this information. They influenced 200 elections on a global scale. And given that we have decreased truth, increased radicalization, and the effects of solidarity, education, this is not good for democracy. This is a decreased chance for democratic actions to come through, for democracies to survive in these difficult times. So to sum up, digital information technology is really a problem. It's wonderful as tools to get things done. Yes, I use my smartphone. It tells me every week for about 20 minutes a day. I think that's, for an adult, that's okay. But when it comes to toddlers or newborns, 5-year-olds, people in kindergarten, children at elementary school, or children in, well, let's say 7th, 8th, 9th grade, should they have a smartphone? No. Should they use Facebook? No. Should they go into other digital phenomena? No. Should we give them this stuff at school in order to get them fixed to digital media? No. Because we know about the risks and side effects, and we know that it doesn't help it's not any good for education. We know that. I showed you the studies, and there are many more. Everything else is rhetoric by a big lobby. Just to give you a final example, the tobacco lobby. They have really succeeded in suppressing the idea that smoking causes lung cancer for over 50 years, because it was known in the 1950s. And every year in Germany, 140,000 people died because of smoking. After about 50 years, governments started to take note. And now they cut down advertisement for smoking. You're no longer allowed to smoke in public buildings, etc. We are now down to 120,000 dead people per year because of smoking. Not 140,000. By the way, 140,000, that's a full 747 per day. This is the damage the tobacco lobby did to Germans. A full 747 dead people a day for 50 years. That's 7 million dead people. Now, compared to the digital lobby, Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, the tobacco lobby is this big because the companies I mentioned are the richest on earth. And they are bombarding us how great everything is. And the media don't mention what I was talking about, well, rarely mention it, because they all depend upon the big ones. And so they cannot tell you this. This is really a problem. So I'm glad to have been able to tell you this. I had to be very brief. And it took me about 35 minutes. Sorry for overriding my time about 5 minutes, but I think it's really important that the word is spread and that parents and everybody who is responsible for younger people takes care, takes note, and acts responsibly, not irresponsibly. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Spitzer. It was a great honor, great privilege having you here today. Please stay in touch. Thank you very much for this deep scientific insight, mentioned problem. I mean the risks and the side effects of digital technology. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo jeszcze Państwu. Powiem, że profesor jest autorem książek publikowanych również w Polsce, tłumaczonych i publikowanych, między innymi Cyberchoroby. Tę książkę i inne polecamy. Co wyniesiecie z dzisiejszego spotkania, zarówno Państwo, którzy zostali z nami do końca, jak i ci, którzy są obecni z nami online? Na pewno nie będą to przemyślenia, które łatwo przenoszą nas w przyszłość, ale na pewno to jest materiał na głębokie przemyślenia i mamy nadzieję, że w ten sposób spełniliśmy chociaż część oczekiwań związanych z 9. konferencją Nienieodpowiedzialnych, która powoli się kończy, a właściwie to już jest koniec konferencji. Pozwólcie, że przytrzymam Was jeszcze przez moment i powiem o tym, że organizatorem jest grupa ANG, współorganizatorem było miasto stołeczne Warszawa, partnerem strategicznym BNP Paribas Bank Polska, partnerzy wspierający to Ikano Bank, ING Bank Śląski, Santander Bank Polska. Partnerzy konferencji to Aegon, Ergohestia, Fundacja Rozwoju Rynku Finansowego, Signal i Duna. Patronem honorowym objął nas Lewiatan. Powiem jeszcze, że te organizacje wspierają nas przez cały rok. Chodzi o działalność Fundacji Nieodpowiedzialni oraz portalu internetowego NNO, gdzie można znaleźć wiele inspirujących, jak mi się wydaje, ciekawych materiałów do konsumowania na ekranach. Tego nie unikniemy, ale przynajmniej mamy świadomość tego, że jeśli już, to staramy się Państwu podsuwać pod oczy wartościowe treści. Mamy tam też wspaniałe wykłady wybitnych intelektualistów, intelektualistek polskich, więc zachęcamy do zapoznania się z nimi. I jeszcze powiem o inicjatywach i organizacjach partnerskich. To Koalicja Liderzy Pro Bono, Fundacja Inicjatyw Społeczno-Ekonomicznych, Polski Instytut Praw Człowieka i Biznesu, także Fundacja na Rzecz Standardów Doradztwa Finansowego, B Corp Market Explorer Better. Patroni medialni to Odpowiedzialny Biznes.pl, Kampanie Społeczne.pl, Ekonomia Społeczna.pl, Biznes Etyczny oraz Think Tank. Ja nazywam się Paweł Oksanowicz. Zapraszam Państwa już teraz na 10. konferencję Nieodpowiedzialnych. Postaramy się, aby była wyjątkowa, abyśmy wspólnie świętowali 10 lat tej wielkiej wspólnej przygody, którą razem tworzymy. Wiem, że wśród nas są osoby, które są z nami od samego początku albo od prawie samego początku. Równie serdecznie żegnamy tych, które są nowo przybyłe i zapraszamy za rok, a także na nasz portal nno.pl. Dziękuję i do zobaczenia.